Yes, so I'm another one of those abrupt transitions here. So I'm from a natural sciences background. I spend part of my time doing theoretical neuroscience, and most of it on the software company. But when I was still a full-time academic, I was working, as I said, in theoretical neuroscience, and the problem we have is the problem with the volume of stuff. There's, I'm not sure how many, but there's well over 100,000 researchers in neuroscience alone. And if each of them produces a paper a year as a first author, then you've got 100,000 papers. 10, 30 pages, you've got well over 1 million pages of text coming out every year. And as a theoretician, there's a broad amount of stuff that you're meant to be aware of. So this really becomes intractable. I mean, it's intractable now, and it's a problem people have been talking about for generations, I think. Even 100 years ago, people were complaining that there was too much stuff being written to keep track of. So, it's not uniquely new, but it seems like it's getting worse just because there's more and more people paid to do research. And the sort of things that go wrong are, so I occasionally get invited to review a paper in a journal I've never seen. There's this whole chunks of literature that I'm unaware of. And you find in that sort of area people reinventing a whole slew of techniques which already exist and are very mature in some other family of journals, just because computational neuroscientists read this and neuroinformaticians read that, and other people don't read stuff in between. So this is a problem because it just makes it slower. And in the end, you can imagine there would be so much out there that you won't be able to keep up with it, so you just sort of end up doing the same thing over and over again. So PhD students at the start of their careers may spend a long, long time learning stuff that people already knew but have forgotten. So then if you think about the literature, there's a number of funny things. If you pick up a textbook, you want to find something out, you've got a textbook, you think it might be in there, you can go straight to the index. And that means somebody has actually read the whole book and decided exactly which bits should go in the index. For the scientific literature, there's absolutely nothing like that. There's no index, even the journals don't index their papers. There's just text. And pretty much the best thing you've got is Google Scholar, which will let you do a free text search on a mountain of stuff. But free text, the whole point of an index is it's being carefully made by somebody who reads the document. It's not just find every occurrence of the word rat. It's showing me the places where they're actually talking about these experiments. So that's why we ended up writing this software tool. And at its very simplest, it's quite a trivial thing. So it lets you store and annotate documents. So I'll start by, I can find mine now. I'll just bring in a load of stuff. So these are not a very well selected set of documents. But I drag these in, and they will all suddenly be uploaded. They'll appear, upload the same set twice. And here they are. And these are all a variety of neuroscience papers. And one of the first things you might want to do about these is just go through them, and for your own personal records, you might want to say what each one's about. I mean, as we heard, you can do experiments on rats, or mice, or guinea pigs, or monkeys, all sorts of things. But even that, it's not obvious a priori when you look at a paper what they're studying and whether it's an awake or an anesthetized animal. So just even very trivial layers of activity can make your life much simpler. So for example here, I can tag these. I can go through and just tag all the papers where they're studying rats. And if I want more tags, I can add another tag for if they're doing it in awake animals, for example. And now I've got another tag that I can apply to these things. If I can visualize these tags and filter on the kind of tags I've got, and then just the usual sort of very simple things, but simple things that are actually quite hard to do if you're just doing this all by shuffling paper. So if you want to get a little bit fancier here, we can go to some. We can turn the whole thing into a database. In fact, you can construct whole document types for your different types of documents for your, so you might separate experimental studies from theoretical studies or mathematical papers or whatever you do. Or we use this in the company to separate invoices from purchase orders and all that kind of boring stuff. And for each one, you can define a whole set of fields you want to attach to your documents. But that's not really the original point of it, because going back to one of these, the real point is what you do while you're reading a document. Oops, I keep looking at that by mistake here. So the idea here is you've probably all seen Acrobat and so on. You can take a PDF and you can put your comments in the PDF. This is very much the same thing at the starting point, except maybe I just want to do a bit of indexing. As I'm reading this through, I say, okay, this paper is about HCN channels. And then what I get for that is I get a view of my notes. I get a view of all the notes I've ever made on my document. And I can order them by, so here I've got what's the beginning of an index. I mean, I've only made 2 notes so far, but I can structure all the text I've ever annotated across my whole set of documents and come back to it and say, okay, I annotated HCN channel, that must be significant. There it is, this is the document. And I'm right back at exactly the place so it's looked it up for me, essentially. If I want to go a little bit further, I can select the text and write my own notes. And had I can choose who I'm addressing these to as well. So the idea of this is it's collaborative as well. So it's on the web, it's your stuff, but it's your stuff that you're probably sharing with other people. So it's at that level, it operates as a kind of collaborative discussion tool. So I think this is probably, I can't reply to it because I'm myself, but normally, if more than one person was reading this, you'd be able to reply to each other's annotations. So one person would write a note, other person will see the note and put their replies and so on. And as you're going through, if you want to, I can reply to it now. So you can kind of build up your threaded discussion about this, and as well as that, you can do another reply. If I want to start building up tags on my annotations, I can build up shared tags in just the same way as before. So then I get sort of a little color-coded set of tags. So this was our but basically this is, it's all just technology. The point at the beginning was that with this vast volume of the biomedical literature, there's a lot of investment in doing this stuff mechanically. So there's a lot of investment by pharmaceutical companies in processing people's work, published papers, and turning them into databases. So, and for that you've got a whole set of fancy algorithms and a whole machine learning and natural language processing literature. But the end result of that is that it really doesn't work. And there's been a lot of research on it. And it still doesn't work just because of the level of false positives. So if, for example, you've got a whole load of papers where people have studied the effect of a particular drug, you can get your natural language algorithms to work on this text. But the trouble is, and you pick out all the things you want. So you want to know when this drug is effective, under what conditions, what cell types, all that stuff. You can extract a lot of stuff, and you can extract quite a lot of good stuff, but you also get a lot of noise in the system. And to clean out the noise, you have to go and read it. So by the time you've paid skillful people to go and read it, you've actually no better off than if they just read it in the first place. So our argument back then was that really, it's doing it automatically is slow and error prone. Whereas there's some people there who really are very well placed to kind of layer this structure on top of their text, which is the authors. So we were arguing that really the authors ought to annotate their own texts. So that is, as part of your process, once your paper is accepted, you get required by the journal for various reasons to annotate your text and to put on not comments like this, but more structured comments. And this happens increasingly now. So if you're doing genetics, every time you mention a gene, you have to link it to the gene ontology identifier for that gene. We were sort of almost 7 or 8 years ago arguing that you would do a much more subtle form of annotation, where you would annotate different concepts, annotate the verbs and cross-link them, and layer on semantic structures on top of your text. We've never found anybody who's actually interested in doing that. So that's still sort of something we may get to in the future. The closest we come is this style of linking. So I can link this particular phrase, so I pick some other document, and say, okay, there's that. Okay, and now I can create a link from one point in one document to one point in another document. Again, which is something, it seems kind of simple, but it's also something that you can't do in the literature. So you'll read a paper like this, and there'll be references, but this reference is to a paper of maybe 20 pages. So they're asserting that this paper sort of backs up what they've just said. But unless you're going to go and read all 20 pages of that paper, it's going to be very hard to work out whether it's true or false. So, even that kind of referencing to a particular place, and very often when you look at certainly the theoretical neuroscience literature, you look at what people are citing. It's very imprecise, and it's often sort of misinterpreted when you come to read the original paper. So to have a level of sort of access like this, where you can see here, and then you can just go straight in, and if you want to, you can read it right there, or you can just click through to it. And what's more, when you're reading this, you see, somebody's linked from somewhere else. So you can see that this has an incoming link from another document. So that way you build up a kind of web of interlinked information, which is your own take on these documents. So to get back then, our idea was that this would be done for the common good. You provide a very easy-to-use tool like this, which would let people curate and annotate documents so that other people can then mine them and read them more profitably. We've not had a huge amount of success yet, but we're still optimistic of people doing this on public data sets. It turns out the place we've had by far the most success is where one person pays somebody else to do it. And the classic case there is in the law. So in the law, in a court case, there may be upwards of 100,000 documents presented in a big civil case. And that's an awful lot of stuff to read. So the way it's done is that they employ a bunch of paralegals who have law degrees but aren't barristers yet, who just read these documents between them, and between their sort of collective knowledge, having read all this stuff, when something comes up, one person is likely to have read it. And they spend massive amounts of time in a variant of this tool, annotating and cross-linking documents, so they may have thousands of links between documents, citing sources and so on. And so that's the case, and the reason that works there is because time is money for the lawyers. And if they're paying somebody to read this stuff, then they might as well pay them, cross-link it and annotate it so that they can then access it more quickly. So I think this is basically what we have at present. Where we're going is apart from sort of polishing and perfecting this, is to get more into the text analytics, because there's a huge body of research at the moment going into deep learning and so on, about how machines can replace the people who are reading the documents, essentially. So that is, there's a lot of very interesting stuff where we anticipate that certainly for the legal case, we'll be able to find documents which agree or disagree with particular things being said in court. Because this system is used live in court as people are working. So that we hope one day to be able to process all the documents, process the text of what's being said, and find the related documents and slot them in and bring them to the attention of barristers. So even now they claim that this can save a large chunk of time in the course of a typical case and an awful lot of paper. But I think there's a long way to go before it's really done all you can do with this kind of tool.
question, well, how you annotate like text documents? Have you got any similar tools for videos, images?
We have nothing for videos. You can do images as, so you can, as well as, you can do, I've disabled it here, you can do freehand annotations. Basically, you can kind of, well, you can do boxes and you can draw, so you can highlight bits of the page or draw arrows. So you can kind of write about a particular thing. I'll put a note on there. And you can draw freehand scribbles on it as well. So if I put a note on here, that will appear in the index, but just as an annotation on an image. So yeah, I should mention that a lot of the stuff we get is scanned. It's not actually original text. So it's scanned in OCR text. So there's quite a lot of use case for this kind of just annotating on the page, not exactly the text.
Other questions? Actually, I just had a question. With respect to the kind of collaborative use of it in an open space, is it's free, but is there a limitation on how many users?
Yeah. So it's free for a relatively low level of usage, and then so people you don't have to pay. It's a kind of freemium model. Yeah, in the collaborative space, I mean, one of the biggest collaborative uses we've had is for people reviewing textbooks, in fact. So for a sort of textbooks which come out again each year, you have a big medical textbook, where the authors of the textbook invite all their readers to come in and annotate the textbook. It's a textbook that leads to exam. And having done the exam, they're invited to come back and put all their annotations on all the bits of the textbook which they think could be improved, or where they think it could be researched, which should be cited and so on. And they spend their whole year doing this, so that they get thousands and thousands of annotations from the individual users. The users have a mechanism for voting, which I think again is not enabled here yet, but the users can up and down vote each other's annotations. And then they have a team of editors which goes through and processes those annotations to decide which ones they actually want to bring in for the next version of the book. That's one use. It's quite widely used in public consultations too. So people developing documents that they want the public input on can then put them out in a restricted form of this and have the public come and say what they think about it.
Can we put your question into general panel
Sure.
discussion? So consensus and more coming to the front and have a general discussion together. Natalie, maybe you can pose your question now.
No, I was wondering whether scientific journals were using these tools for reviewing papers, because this is a use that I could imagine.
Yeah. We're aware of a couple of conferences that do, but not journals that do it yet. But I think it has a lot of mileage, because it's a lot easier to review that way. You know, right, page 3, column, paragraph 4, you say, you know.
Yeah, well, that's how you do now.
That's how you do now, yeah. It's so old-fashioned in a way.
What's the legal status of acute? I mean, normally any sections get 1%. What's the legal status of it?
It's public, and it's also sold by a company called NIP, which basically owns the rights to sell that data. So yeah, I mean, ethics is different from legality, but it's certainly legal to use it. People's public space.
We should say that one of the things we're most anxious about though is around the archiving, because our part of the project is ESRC funded, and I think the ESRC is very engaging thinking around what would an archive made up of tweets around emotional distress be, and we're very uncomfortable with that. And obviously, even though it's a public sphere, people's understanding of what public means is variable. And also, Francis has been doing work around spotlighting. I don't know if you want to say something about that.
So essentially, people expect to have particular audiences when they put up a tweet. And an issue with this kind of research is you're basically putting a spotlight on people who are in emotional distress. Think about the ethics of that. But there are some ways that I already discussed to kind of get around that. So you don't directly quote, which means that that person's tweet can't then be put into Google and that person be found again, re-identified. And that's one way to talk about the way that people use Twitter for emotional distress without kind of spotlighting particular people who are in emotional distress.
May I add to that? Because I've done a project on pre-drinking using big data Twitter as well. Twitter, everything on Twitter, where we see that is public, if they don't make it a private profile or not private messaging each other, is public information. So it's not just the point about it being on internet, because even if you go on internet, there are websites that you can't just take information from them, because those information could be owned by somebody, even if everybody could see on the internet. But Twitter is different. Every tweet is a publicly available information, whether the tweet user knows it or not. And there are limitations on searching these tweets as well, because it's only you get sort of rate limited. So it's only at any time of searching, only 1% of tweet is available to research. Otherwise, you have to pay. So the 1% is free, but depending on how many tweets there are at that particular point. So it is a complicated process, and the ethical issue is whether the user actually know that this information could be used by anyone, and could be used by companies, or well, extracted by companies, and then get commercial profit from that. I don't think most Twitter users know that.
Is that really a work on the ethics, about protection and integrity, and what people actually think is happening due to the context in which we give? And that's just a fascinating thing about Twitter, what people actually think, is happening. And it's not like being in a doctor's surgery or something like that. It's something different. Yeah, very interesting.
Well, I suppose, do people even know, even in a doctor's surgery context, do we know when we go to our GP who has access to the information in every single way? You know, when we go onto the medals, that technically is what is biophysical behavior. Do people know? Do people think about that? People can be observing that at any given point in time. Bigger question of ethics.
Maybe, was there another question or?
Yeah, I wanted to ask,
Okay.
but I'm sure it was done, but just so if it has been done, or and if it was ethically possible to contact the people that committed an attempt of suicide or suicide, and contact their families, and then go back and see, okay, after this, what happened before this event, and create a database where you know that the tweets or the messages were linked to a distress since the event happened. So you are sure that there was an emotional distress compared to you are looking at keywords or phrases where you don't really know what happened after.
There are two things to say about it. We didn't actually get to talk about the study that someone else has done. I think we showed the slide that talked about it, but I didn't actually speak about it. So someone had basically gone through and looked at someone's tweets in the last day before they committed suicide. There are a few ethical issues with that. Those tweets had been deleted, but they can re-access them by going to the mainstream media to get them. So there are issues with consent, and not just consent, also not respecting the wishes of the people who deleted the account. What was the other thing I was going to say? The other thing I was going to say is that Samaritans are, although they are a suicide reduction organisation, they're quite interested in how to help people before they get to that point. So I suppose we're interested in helpful responses and people who don't actually necessarily go through with it. I'm not sure if I'm expressing this
Yeah,
the right way.
I understand, but maybe the pessimist point of view would be that actually the people that really commit suicide or act were not saying anything on Twitter or Facebook. So maybe there is no threat, because actually when someone is really distressed, he's not communicating with an immediate. So that's why. Yeah.
Well, I think the three talks showcase very nicely that, I mean, there are very sophisticated tools for document analysis. Those tools, for example, social network analysis have got a very important quantitative component. But, and this links to what we were discussing before about computers and algorithms, you always need some sort of knowledge in order to capture what really is in the document or what you can analyze in the document. And for example, in Robert's talk, I mean, the annotation that is done by the author of the document is much better than any automatic annotation, because I mean, you have the knowledge to annotate. And what I wanted to ask the three of you is to what extent you think you can do both mastery of the tools and knowledge of the background alone, yourself, or whether it is necessary to collaborate in order to maximize the benefits. I mean, to have very sophisticated tools that maybe are not within exactly your area of expertise, and the knowledge of the area of expertise you need to properly analyze the field you are analyzing.
We are actually collaborating with a team that employs Jonathan that are going to kind of later on in the project implement some quantitative analysis tools. And I think for us it's important to have their help, not just in terms of data collection, but also data analysis. But it's also important that they have our help in terms of data verification and understanding whether, for example, sentiment analysis is really getting to the kind of analytical questions that we're asking about every day on our campus day.
Yeah, and I think it is difficult because yes, that you might get more sort of sophisticated, in-depth sort of answer to your questions, perhaps, so in terms of research questions, with specific knowledge. So, for example, in the stuff that the artifacts and documents I collected, that SNA would sort of feed into it, and then you could do a sort of quite sophisticated SNA analysis with it. But I think at the same time, that could lead into almost a one-dimensional understanding of truth. What we were sort of saying earlier on is that actually I think a collaborative, I suppose, approach, or that kind of transparency at least, and not saying that, okay, I think SNA would be best suited for the material that I'm working with, is important, but that obviously that comes with my own ontological / epistemological view. But I think, especially from the stuff that I've worked with so far, I think collaboratively working has seen much more benefits. Like even working with young people who have no specialized knowledge at all, even about research, about social networks, about social capital, that actually was really valuable because it highlights things that I haven't seen before previously, and I think that makes you more almost in touch of the reality itself and a little bit of the sort of agency of the things that behind the document itself. And I think that is important, but whether how feasible or practical it is to do sometimes.
Certainly among our users, we see a bit of everything really. So we have PhD students who just keep all their literature in this thing and they tag and annotate primarily, and so that when they come to write their literature review, it's just all already there for them. They can have a tag and find everything that matters for that particular chunk of their thesis. And then we have other people where the big boss of the law firm doesn't want to know anything, he just wants to read the things and click on the links, wants to get lots of other people to learn in depth the tools and how to code everything up. So there's a big spectrum, but I think probably the collaborative one is, yeah, is the dominant model in where we see this being used. With a whole spread of skills, because even in a law context, there are people who specialize in financial, others who specialize in the contractual aspects of the case. And you need all that stuff in the same place when you come to trial, so it has to be all put together and sort of seamlessly integrated, but one person can't put it all together.
Is there any other questions? Or we will be very on time for the lunch.
Yeah.
Okay?
So, well, basically, lunch is in the